This is our final session. This is one of the sessions that I really enjoy because we get to talk to some of my favorite people. These are the delegates that I get to invite to join me here and get to spend the time off camera with them as well. They're some of the smartest, most fun people that you get to spend time with. If you'd like to become a delegate, of course, there's a submission form up the top on the Tech Field Day website. We wanted to have a bit of a roundtable discussion of people's impressions and things that we didn't really talk about as we had the last day and a half of presentations, where it was all focused on what the individual presenting companies were talking about. And in this roundtable, we want to talk a little bit more about the things that are on our minds, particularly those of us who are working practically with these products, who have to put them into very complex, very brownfield kind of environments, and who are trying to navigate what's the right thing to do for our customers. And what I saw was that we have a feeling that hybrid cloud or private cloud is turning into a real thing, but it's a different thing to public cloud. I think we saw particularly Oxide, Morpheus, a couple of companies that are very much about this is your on-premises cloud, and it looks like a cloud, only it doesn't look like the public clouds. Please start leaping in and joining me in this conversation, because I don't want to monologue for half an hour.
I had a little context dissonance because some of what was presented as hybrid cloud felt a little like multi-cloud to me. But then, I hate, even though I participate in them all the time, these semantic discussions. And one note that I took at some point was, is hybrid cloud really just storage now? It's just storage tiering. I don't know, but one theme we saw was this idea, which I really thought of as a multi-cloud idea, which is put your workload where you want to put it, move it as you want to move it. That's not multi-cloud in my considered opinion. My considered opinion is you can put different parts of an application wherever you want to put them, and they can interact together. The really neat thing that I think we saw, though, was throughout this field day was this enablement of placing a workload in a place that you want to put it for all the various reasons you need to, and still have the observability, the management. These vendors are driving towards that, whether it's the happy, easy, quick, multi-rack home of an Oxide, or it is a multi-environment management with all of the compliance and reliability bells and whistles of an HPE.
So I wanted to hit on one of the things you said in there about that having your data everywhere and putting the bit of your application where you need, and it's getting execution on different places has always been the easy part. Getting the data in those places has been different. Kimberly, have you seen a lot of change in the last few months last couple of years around making data available wherever the workload is going to be? Because there's simple physics involved in a lot of that.
Yeah, I think that's where the on-prem, part of the on-premise issue is actually why the things are staying on-prem. The data sovereignty, how hard it is to move the data in terms of the problems with physics. So the concept that everything was going to end up in a public cloud has just not happened from an enterprise. And there's many, many companies that still have very large environments sitting there. So we are seeing people like the Oxide look at ways to bring a secure environment on-prem. We're seeing things like Pure Storage saying, okay, so you're going to have data on-prem. I'm going to be able to manage it up on the cloud as well, move it to where I need to be, where the appropriate places, as you were talking about, Guy. And then you see, the piece of what HPE was talking about, which was this cloud operations capability of saying, I've got different environments, let me manage it where it most appropriately would be managed, but give me a control plane to simplify that environment. So, yeah.
And while we're sitting on this corner, I wanted to bring in Karen, because Karen's insight around the difference between storage and data is always important.
Yes.
Storage companies talk about data when they actually mean storage.
Yeah.
Have you seen things changing? Did you see anything?
So definitely this week I saw better understanding of what the outside the storage world, what we think data management and data classification and data governance are, is still really behind those of us that have been doing data management, data governance for multiple decades. But I think now at least I'm seeing a better understanding of it, like related to the sovereignty issue for data sovereignty, is that the message I took that wasn't said was that for many enterprises, the vendors believe that the cloud isn't meeting their data sovereignty needs. And that to me was sort of a revelation in that, yes, data sovereignty is actually very hard to deal with, because like the big thing that happens with most cloud services is that, yeah, you can you can choose the region where you store the data, but some of the surrounding services require that data to be exposed in another region that you might. So that means people like the EU data centers and the Chinese clouds and all of that, they can't make use of many services in that cloud provider. So maybe their cost benefit risk is way off. And maybe that's what's driving a need to manage data sovereignty better.
So, to go along with that, right, we had the confluence of both the Broadcom VMware debacle. We also had Microsoft, right, with the lawsuit, or not with the court case in Paris, where they would said, obviously if there was French owners' data, and they were asked by the U.S. based on the Cloud Act to give it up, they would have no choice. That kind of blew up. That became sovereignty became all of a sudden conversation 1A if AI was one. So there's a lot of that going on, and so I think the reality though is that there's going to be ongoing change, right? You can't predict the future. You don't know what AI things you're going to do. You're not going to know what new compliance things are going to come about. You're not going to. Some governments are going to deregulate to try to help business. So I think. Going back also to what Guy was saying about hybrid cloud and being able to move these workloads and data sets around, what I work on a lot is an architecture of optimizing for data placement in a way that it can be used in all the different places, either in place where you have compute in the cloud or compute in the service using the data in place. Now, it may sound, there's physics involved. That's only a problem if it's a problem. Some workloads are fine with that, some are not. So when they're not, you obviously have to get a copy of that data to the place where the workload has to run. That's data motion, right? So these technologies like Electra, like other companies, Pure, that can get that stuff up there, and Purity does that, it automates that data transfer, right? So when these storage companies talk about governance and compliance, they really, where you stand depends on where you sit, right? They see it from their perspective, but the reality is that they are enablers of being able to achieve those compliance, those governance tasks by the folks who will use them, but they don't in themselves achieve that stuff, right? And that sometimes they fall over on that. Sometimes they get a little over their skis on what they can, what they do in those worlds, and sometimes they don't even have a full understanding of those terms. And it's demonstrated in a lot of those presentations. But overall, when you talk like Oxide approaching their kind of private cloud fortress, I'll call it, because it's all controlled and completely attested for. I think that's going to be a great option for people to move Kubernetes workloads or even KVM or kind of other virtual machine type of formats to that. In order to achieve, I think it's all going to be driven by this desire for sovereignty and governance, right workload, right time. But the data architecture is kind of separate to that. So you have to have the data architecture kind of set up to do this kind of change, to move data where you got to move it. But the workloads, they're ephemeral. They can go wherever they want, but you have to have the right, architecture and networking for all that. So it's kind of two planes of existence. So so I both agree and disagree with Connie on the fact that it's data moving all over the place. The workloads need to move, but they're almost like two separate, independent, but somewhat related motions, right? That's conflicting, but that's why no one's answered it, because it's a complex topic.
It's still, and it's complicated. And the other element around this, and one that Mike and I talk about a bit, is the financial operations around this, is having completely different models. We talked a little bit about having different models. Glenn, you brought it up in the last presentation, but just how do you financially manage this diversity of platforms you're ending up on, and work out where is the right place from both compliance, but also from cost and capability? How does that matrix all fit together?
mean, that's where a lot of the on-premise stuff kind of falls down compared to public cloud. Is public cloud, it's entirely consumption-based. You know exactly what you're spending by the minute. Private cloud, a lot of those costs are hidden, right? And you don't see them until later, if ever. Right? There's the cost of the acquiring the equipment and racking and stacking it and all that. And that's clear, but the power costs, the cooling costs, the personnel costs are things that aren't usually baked into the total cost of ownership of that private cloud.
True.
I would actually argue that it's the exact opposite. So one of the big challenges companies have right now and why they're doing repatriation is because, particularly with AI, they're getting hit with
The bill shock.
budgeted
Yeah.
bills because they don't have visibility to it. And you have things like an AI agent that, you know, to get started costs $20, $30 a month when you start developing it. And then you deploy it and your cost spiral not from 20 to 70 or 20 to 100,
Yeah.
but to $100,000 a month. And the shock is incredible and it's unbudgeted. And you can't not spend that because you have this service now that's valuable. So you want to repatriate that. And that's the other part of the financial thing that's coming up, which I sort of alluded to and brought up with Oxide folks, is there was a change in the tax law this year that allows large corporations to write off 100% of their CapEx in this calendar year, in the calendar year, not having to depreciate it over a 5 or 7 year term. That is waking people up to the fact that they actually do get a tax benefit, and OpEx is no longer as competitive as it used to be to CapEx. There's now a very valid reason to go CapEx and bring things on-prem again.
Yeah.
One place in the world.
I think
That
that,
law changed in the US
Yes.
is what I'm saying.
In the
Yeah.
US, yes.
I think one thing that I keep thinking about is the complexity of running an IT operation in 2025. All of the things you guys have been talking about, endless lists of security threats, the need and imperative to turn AI into something that is monetizing for the organization, and then repatriation and the complexity of building out infrastructure. At the same time, staffing remains one of the biggest challenges for IT organizations. And so one of the things that I really like to hear from many vendors is simplification. Whether it's Oxide's rack 'em, stack 'em Lego racks, I mean, they're very cool, or just, the simplification of point and click provisioning from HPE. We saw the vendor community is focused in on that. Now, whether they can deliver and whether this is something where IT shops are feeling confident about deploying these private clouds without having to worry about, key staff departures ruining their operations. I think that's something that the proof is still in the pudding.
And I thought it was rather telling when Pure Storage talked about version 2.0 for Fusion, which was, why'd you do what you find out about version 1.0? Well, our guys at UCLI really want to use it and they don't want to go over there. So if you want them to be able to take the advantage of the simplification, you also have to give the guys that know how to make it all happen and have that, knowledge base, give them the tools that they want to use at the same time. So you just can't
Yeah, we talk about simplification.
make everything.
Now. Yeah, we talk about simplification, but the reality is that we're talking about, like, we heard the storage story from HPE today, right? And they announced RDMA over object for that Electra box, the X10,000, right? So obviously that implies that that's going to be sitting next to GPU. Great. The reality, though, and the way you're going to have some organizations that go and put in, go and buy the new, GPU, the Blackwell stuff, and soon the Vera Rubin stuff. But this stuff's all requiring liquid cooling, which changes the game from an operational perspective, which I think is going to drive a lot of enterprise customers to prefer to use GPUs as service providers for that kind of stuff, because it's one thing to have an air-cooled environment. I mean, this is where things get physical. And if you can get away with that, that's great. You can manage it and you can understand it more like a traditional IT environment. Once you start bringing in liquid cooling and things like that, things get a little different. And most folks don't know how to operationalize that. And you might get somebody to help you, some managed service in your colo to go and do that, but that's still happening, right? That's not a thing yet. In some places it is, and I could talk about that another time. But I just think it's going to drive a lot of enterprises to say, you know what, that's too much of a headache. That's really not my wheelhouse. So when I see these storage folks come out with these, RDMA over these, this fast RDMA, object storage that are meant for training, maybe tuning. It's like, okay, but that's going to be meant for the storage just needs to be in the GPU and the service provider, not in an enterprise itself. I'm going to need to get my data, my lakehouse, my data pipeline. I may want to do that on, I don't need the RDMA stuff. I just need, more like a regular pipeline. Maybe I need that tokenization embedding done there. That's great. But I don't need that kind of performance or that specific type of performance. That's going to go somewhere else. I'm questioning the confluence of these things because this stuff is not simple to manage at all from a physical perspective, and that's where we're having also a bigger shortfall of people. We need real engineers, like physical plant engineers, to help with this.
It's that discussion from Oxide was talking about they've been really power efficient, 15 kilowatt rack. That's a ceiling on it. It's managed to be at that ceiling. You're at AI infrastructure field day, they're talking about 200 kilowatt, 300 kilowatts.
600 in Vera Rubin.
So 600 kilowatt racks. And that your data center's got to be built for that.
800
because
volts.
all of a sudden it's 40 racks worth of power being consumed in one rack. And this absolutely is, as Glenn's saying, there's a huge amount of engineering change. And you have to have a data center that's built for it. So I completely agree that you'll see neoclouds being the way most of that high density, high performance GPU is being delivered for many companies.
Now put that in context of all the things that Morpheus was saying, moving the workloads. Like if I got to use those guys, that means I'm going to have compute over there, not GPU, but also CPU compute to do stuff there, right? So what is that going to look like? It's a whole other set of apps.
I think kind of to your point, like one of the things I think gets lost in the AI conversation just in general, because everyone gets so excited about AI, everyone wants to do it. They don't point out that doing AI means very different things to different people.
Absolutely.
So there are people that are going to go buy thousands of GPUs. Liquid cooling is an issue for them, and they're on a whole different level. But there's, and they do need that very fast storage. But there's only a handful of those, real hyperscale organizations. For other people, it's as simple as, okay, I'm just going to use, an OpenAI endpoint. I don't need to really train it. I'm just going to set up RAG. There's different levels, but I think the conversation just becomes everyone's doing AI. This is what you need.
Good point.
Yeah, and
I think another interesting departure, building on what you said, Mitch, was the fact that there's, I was just looking through my notes from AI infrastructure field, right? And which is exactly 6 months ago today, by the way, which is interesting. And the thrust was, how are we going to get GPU power to people as quickly as possible? And, you're going to need all these, huge power demands to kind of like a drumbeat of, do we really need to do that? In a lot of cases, right, what people are applying AI to could just as well run on a CPU, right? Certainly inference, you can make the case that a lot of the inference would certainly work there. So I found interesting that some of the vendors we talked to were kind of pushing back on that a bit, right? Especially Oxide, of course, because, well, they have the story. But the other thing, especially with the Fortinet folks, is, again, I don't know why the CIOs and why the CISOs are not got the CIOs or the CTOs' ears on the, we were talking about MCPs and the huge exposure, right, that we saw Fortinet demonstrate yesterday to things we didn't even think of, where as they were demoing, right, that, hey, tell me what advanced stuff I can do. Please tell me. And essentially rootkit, an environment because somebody decided to, over the weekend to impress their boss, they vibe coded a website, which has all of these vulnerabilities that now we've quadrupled or quintupled our attack vector sphere, if you will. And to me, it's just this rush towards AI because, I don't know, your buddies on the golf course are doing it too.
So Jim, that's not
It's
that's not entirely fair because it's
Okay.
not just the applications that are vibe coded over the weekend. That was an example they gave.
Okay.
It's an inherent misunderstanding of how AI operates and
Yeah.
how these models
Okay.
work. So
Yeah.
really quite sophisticated, really AI practitioners right now don't even understand
Yeah.
this. And that the vulnerabilities that exist in that way are inherent to the models, how they're trained, how the RAG works, how they're tuned, what data they're exposed to.
Yeah.
And the focus that is only emerging now from what I see on data curation, data limitations, guardrails around data. That's incipient right now. People are
Right.
suddenly, like think about MCP, just MCP alone. Who in their right mind publishes a protocol and adopts it left, right, and center that actually starts with open access?
Right.
Karen over here is showing her horrified face.
Well, so during the Fortinet presentation yesterday, I think we kind of started off. Kimberly had a question about, okay, but AI is just another workload. So what's unique about protecting AI? And then they went through their examples of exploiting agents and things like that. And then kind of at the end, I think Karen had a question or more comment about, I'd like to see an example of, an inside actor threat.
Oh,
But the thing is, I think one of the things that makes AI unique as a threat is when you have an agent with tools that have permissions in your environment, it kind of becomes an inside threat.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well,
Both
and
for
I think the
oh,
term
sorry.
that she used was colloquial, or they use colloquial, is that the language we're using to talk to the AI and the agent is just normal language. I don't have to know how to do the definitive coding. And so I'm asked, and I can explore. and
You
get
can
really
socially
curious.
engineer
Yeah,
the
it's
AI.
social-
It's social engineering.
Social engineering
AI.
the AI and the AI agents talking to the AI agents, and then, all of a sudden I've got, as you said, I've got the tools to go and
But
do the hacking.
The interesting thing about sort of what Fortinet showed, and I think what a lot of the other vendors showed, is different perspectives on how to think about the entire cloud infrastructure, right? And I'll use the US colloquialism of when all you have are nails, everything looks like a hammer. And if you are a storage provider, you look at things through the lens of storage and you say, how do we manage the world through storage? And, we have excess CPU, so we can put an AI agent and an LLM and an MCP server in the middle of our storage. And I think, Jim, somebody like Glenn might have said, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
But then you step back from Fortinet and you look at Oxide and HP. They have a different view of what's your perspective, your 100,000 foot level of what my infrastructure looks like and how do I manage it? And I think managing your infrastructure is where the value is, not in the infrastructure components themselves. HPE is a hardware purveyor, and so they still want to talk about hardware, but the real value they're bringing isn't the fact that they can put CPUs and disk drives in your data center. The value they're bringing is their ability to span and manage this environment across your environment. And more, Oxide took a different perspective of, we're going to build a specific environment that is well managed from top to bottom in order to provide you that same capability in a different way.
Got something, Nate?
Oh, I was still just thinking of the when you were talking about social engineering the agents. There's even you sometimes there's rules where it can't give you an answer and you just have to rephrase what you're asking and you're still going to get it. Like he gave the example yesterday, just putting an exclamation point at the end of it meant that now I'm yelling and, oh, okay, yeah, actually here's the answer.
Yeah, we saw at one field day, I can't remember which one, that you could flirt with an agent to get it to give up its goods, or you could bully it. Those
Wow. Wow.
And because they really are, okay, this sounds like an insult, but it's like talking to a toddler who has a new iPhone in that they don't know what they don't know and they don't understand risk. But you can do that. And that's when I think of compute, I never think that way. So it's having to do this adjustment on how AI works that has really got me thinking of other things. And I think one of my concerns was, and I know they're limited on time, is that we only really saw one presentation that addressed AI protection or security from the role of AI vulnerabilities and threats. So almost all, again, thinking about storage, people are going to think about how to protect storage with access controls and RBAC, but those aren't going to help you if someone has updated every GitHub repository out there to spoil the training data. You know, it's not just access controls for security. And I'm worried that we're going out and building AI infrastructure and AI storage without thinking about how our security needs have changed because of that.
It's funny, this isn't security field day, but the theme that pops up around every trend, IoT, public cloud, AI is, oh, we forgot about to build security into this and now we need to backpedal,
Yeah.
figure out how to shoehorn it in instead of developing it to be more secure from the ground up. And MCP is just the latest example of that. When are we going to learn as an industry, I guess, is the ultimate question.
I mean, we should be thinking about security up front.
Yeah.
But
It's somebody else's problem. I'm developing the product.
Yeah.
Somebody else needs to figure out how to secure it. Right?
Yeah.
Well, also consider a lot of these developers are now using AI tools, and now they've shown like 235% more, security errors in the code that AI is producing. You must wonder if whose side they're on.
Because they've been trained on public repositories, and most of the really good work, database designs, coding, are usually not public repositories. So the training data is severely biased towards much more informal practices, I'll say.
Yeah, if it's been trained on the code that I've written, it's going to be terrible.
God help us all.
Code. And it probably is, since I have repos sitting up and publicly on GitHub. I think in terms of that social engineering of the AI, it's important to remember that AI typically understands the association between everything, but has no understanding of the meaning of the thing. And so it can't apply judgment. You've got to put external judgment, the external guardrails. You've got to wrap security around it. And this is why when one of the vendors I talked to recently, I don't think it was somebody who was here this week, I was saying, do you have an API gateway that sits in front of your LLM engine? They said, no, we just got MCP. That's not enough. You shouldn't be putting this stuff all out public.
I feel like Oxide was the closest thing to a real cloud that we saw as far as a private cloud goes, right? And like a public cloud, like a public cloud. Cleanest sheet that I saw. That the other vendors are kind of like they're just cobbling together things a little bit, and it doesn't necessarily feel like a cloud.
Well, those are the two approaches, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's the single source and there's the best breed enablement.
Yeah.
And so Oxide's the single source.
Yeah.
And they're really consciously saying there's a line we're not going past, but below that line, it's 100% Oxide.
Yeah.
Super simple, super expensive, bing, bang, boom. But for the most part, what we were seeing in terms of unification was we connect everybody and can't connect everybody, and we are partnering or planning to partner with everybody, and you can bring it all together at this level, whatever spot layer they chose.
So to, I hear that. I mean, it's really clean. It's because it's a sweep the floor strategy.
Yeah.
Right? And sweep the floor strategies, you're starting, you had an opportunity to start all over again and build it up. But the reality of these enterprises, that's not going to happen. I mean, you have legacy systems that have been there that nobody wants to touch, because if you touch the things, they go bump in the night and everybody goes screaming and everything and all that other stuff. So there's a piece of this to say, how do you move forward and bring simplification to this very complex environment that continues to speed up, constantly. And I think that's what you're seeing that HPE is doing, and also as when we look at control planes for the data side, that's like what Pure is doing and others are doing. That's what the control planes are all about: is how do I simplify in environments that are there today. I mean, I think we're all jazzed about the Oxide stuff and everything, because the concept of like, wow, that's really cool stuff. It's hardware. I know somebody said that's not even interesting, but it's still hard. It's hard.
No, it is
really cool.
It is very interesting, and the hardware is very interesting. The Oxide definitely provides hardware value, as well as software value. When you look at the other vendors that we're talking about, the real value that they're providing is in how you're managing the infrastructure, the control plane,
Mhm.
right? Not the computer data plane, the value that they're really providing.